are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the College Loop Podcast, episode 218 of the College Loop Podcast. I'm Dylan Larck, ABoyTech on Twitter. Here to talk to you about the latest in Auburn football and give y'all a little synopsis of what I think Auburn needs to do to have a breakout season in 2024. Well, before we get started with that, got a little bit of news to talk about, and just so everyone's aware, if you haven't seen the last episode, go ahead and thank all of y'all for 800 subscribers. It's such a blessing to have all 800, and I think two of you, as this is currently being recorded, following the show and having great conversation in the comments as well. So with that, getting right into the news, Phil Steele has pretty much released his all SEC teams that has quite a few Tigers that we see. 6 Tigers, correction, math is wrong, 7 Tigers on his all SEC teams, 2 Auburn Tigers in the first team, and Jarquez Hunter, who is, by most accounts, and including my own, probably the best running back in the SEC. I think the only person who could really contest that is Travis Etienne. But him on a new team, I'm going to give Jarquez Hunter the edge there. And then after that, Keontae Scott making his return to another as the SEC first team for a punt returner. So still would like to see him get some credit as the defensive back too, but as long as the first teamer, an All-American out of Auburn, would be cool. Don't really care what position it's at. Then other players on this list are going to be Rivaldo Fairweather, who I was fairly surprised wasn't on the first team as a tight end. Alex McPherson, Keandre Lambert-Smith making an appearance, Kyan Lee, and Jalen McLeod all getting nods on Phil Steele's all SEC teams. Of course, his magazine comes out in just a couple of weeks, so I'll be lining up at Books A Million for mine because Phil Steele's magazine is probably my favorite. That's a free ad for those magazines, by the way. They've always been the best magazines out of the bunch. But with that, moving on to our next segment. And, of course, after this, we're going to get into our way too early preview of the Arkansas game. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. But I made a list of what I think Auburn needs to do to have a breakout season in 2024. And I kind of went to the path where most of this might be on the offensive side of the ball, which probably shouldn't surprise a lot of people. But starting off with the defensive side of the ball, the interior defensive line has to force pressure on the quarterback. Now, we got this out of Marcus Harris last year, but outside of Marcus Harris, didn't really get a lot of that. Jason Jones and Justin Rogers weren't really there to get pressure on the quarterback. Now, you go to the portal. You pick up Philip Bleedy. You pick up Terrell Carter. You pick up Gage Keys. You pick up these interior defensive linemen. You get Malik Blockton out of the recruiting ranks. You're trying to get to where you have a dominant defensive line. You have Keldrick Falk. You have Jalen McLeod already ready to go, ready to get to the backfield. And Jalen McLeod already pretty much had a really good season last year. Outside of if he hadn't been injured most of the season, he probably would have been higher up in the SEC in terms of getting sacks. Keldrick Falk, on the other hand, had to get into the game as well. I don't really see defensive ends as like the penetrating force the offensive line anymore. Now you're kind of looking at tackles for losses for Keldrick Falk, which, teach your own. I think Keldrick Falk still could get a lot of sacks in the league, but looking at the interior of the defensive line, I know the SEC likes to run the ball. You want to plug up gaps with the nose tackles, but the interior defensive line was, outside of Marcus Harris, probably one of the weakest spots of Auburn's defense last year, outside of just going into the depth of different positions. Like the linebacker depth last year was abysmal. But going into this year, you picked up 3 defensive linemen in the portal. You picked up Malik Blockton, a 4-star out of Pike Road. You're trying to get the steps in the right direction to build this dominant defensive line that, last time Auburn's really seen that dominant defensive line presence was 2019 with Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown. Derek Brown being the last All-American that Auburn has had. Now, to do this, you already had the steps in the right direction. You lost your defensive line coach. You got a new one coming in right inside the coaching staff that was already in place. Now you got to get the right steps. Now you get the right schemes, right formations, right everything else. And I think the steps are there. I think the talent is definitely there. I think that Philip Bleedy, you've heard it from me already. I already think that he is one of the breakout players for this upcoming season. Sorry, I got a cough. So, and after that, there is a lot of hype around this defensive line group. And of course, again, like I said earlier, you already have that hype built with the guys on the edge. but the interior defensive line is so important in the SEC. You have to have a good front. You win battles in the trenches to win games, to win championships. And that's what Auburn needs to do. And that's what, excuse me, there we go again. That's what Auburn needs to do in order to have a great season defensively. And that's really the only urge I really have for the defense to do for the season to happen. I think the linebacker room is stacked. I think that you have bringing back Eugene Asante and Austin Keys is huge. And you got guys behind him like DeMarcus Riddick, a 4-star, and of course Dorian Mousey, who you picked up out of Duke. So very excited as the linebacker room plays out in the secondary. I will never not have faith in a crime dog secondary. Crime dog and of course Charles Kelly as well. But Jaron Thompson was a huge pickup. Caleb Wood's going to develop very nicely at the safety position. Really just wanting to see how Keontae Scott plays the outside corner position. But other than that, a lot of faith in the other position groups. It's the interior defensive line I'm the most worried about. Now at the 4th spot is, of course, the wide receiver room. Of course, this is going to be the position, that group that everyone's talking about this offseason and going into the season, going into last season as well. How just not good the wide receiver room was last year. And, of course, they had the talent. Jay Fair was very good. Wish him the best of luck at USC. Javarius Johnson was a solid depth piece. But like guys like Shane Hooks and names that are completely blanking on me right now, guys that didn't really work out that you got from the portal. Jair Shorter, who of course did average 10 yards a catch while he was at Auburn, but of course he only got with that one catch. So going into that, I mean, you picked up Cam Coleman, you've picked up Perry Thompson, you picked up the Bryce Kane, Malcolm Simmons, the Freeze 4, of course, Dylan Gentry, part of the Freeze 5, Condre Lambert-Smith, Robert Lewis. You made those steps in the right direction to get a great wide receiver room, a room that I think has the potential to be Auburn's most talented wide receiver room they've ever seen. So that's just kind of where Auburn, that's where the offense comes into place. Marcus Davis has been a great wide receivers coach since he stepped foot on the plane. He's been a great wide receivers coach since he started coaching wide receivers. So going into this year, you have all the talent in the world. You have all of the potential in the world to have this outstanding wide receiver room. You have so much potential to have Auburn's first 1,000-yard receiver in a hot minute. Maybe not this year, but down the line, the steps are in place for Auburn to have a 1,000-yard receiver. I think it would be I don't want to say a failure if Cam Coleman doesn't hit it, but it would be mildly disappointing in a sense that you're expecting it from it now, because it's set. Auburn is expected to do things with the wide receiver position right now, something that Auburn hasn't really had to ever do, at least in the past 10 years. Of course, they've had Darius Slayton. They've had Darvin Adams back in 2010, one of my favorite receivers ever, Sammy Coates. But they were never the front line of the offense. It was always the run game. Now you have Cam Coleman. You got all the guys that I just named earlier. Now is the chance. You've seen it at A-Day. You haven't seen the rest. You haven't seen Malcolm Simmons and Perry Thompson yet. You haven't even seen Condre Lambert-Smith in an Auburn uniform yet. Now the steps are made. Now the steps are there. And the formula is set to where you have to show it on the field. And, of course, the first game is against Alabama A&M. It's going to be easy to kind of work that in. But after that, you got Cal. Cal has a defensive-minded coach who's going to be looking to try to shut down Auburn's pass game as much as possible. But this year might be mostly the running game to watch out for. But if the wide receiver room looks better, I think that Auburn has a chance to just absolutely surprise a lot of people in terms of winning games they probably shouldn't. Going in my number 3 spot is, of course, going to be the offensive line. Last year, the offensive line was abysmally just all over the place. We had holding calls, we had false starts, and of course, some of are going to happen no matter what in football. But it seemed that a lot of Auburn's penalties were called after Auburn gained 5+ yards on any play. You'd get that holding call, you'd get the false starts, you'd get the just unnecessary penalties that just riddled Auburn last year. This year, it is up to the entire new look offensive line. You're going to have Connor Lew starting the entire season. You're going to have Dylan Wade looking to kind of come back and rekindle what he had last year. You're going to have a Xavion Miller on the right tackle position who's going to be looking at a chance to show that he's developed. You're going to be looking at Jeremiah Wright, who's going to hopefully start the entire season. Of course, Percy Lewis, who is an all-SEC caliber left tackle, who transferred in. that unit has to be the best it possibly can be. And of course, there's a lot of talent there. Connor Lew, I think, is going to be talked about in a couple of months as the best center in college football. I don't think that's a hot take whatsoever. I think if Connor Lew isn't on anybody's mind as the top center in college football, I think they're crazy. I don't think they know ball very much, because that's just how good Connor Lew has been since he stepped foot on the Plains. He's been ready to play ever since he signed his name on the dotted line. I just think going into this year, you have to show that improvement on the offensive line. You have to be ready to go, have to be ready to shut down getting Payton Thorne sacked. You have to be able to open up lanes in the run game. Of course, that was something that they really struggled with at A-Day, was opening up lanes for Jarquez, Brian Battie, Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb, whoever was running the ball at A-Day. They're really struggling to open up gaps. And hopefully that's improved since then. Fingers crossed that it has, knock on wood that it has. But that's really the meat and potatoes of it. It goes back to my fifth one. Games are won in the trenches, and Auburn last year struggled winning on the offensive side of the trench. They were just making mistakes, missing assignments, getting Payton Thorne sacked, forcing errant throws from Payton Thorne because he had to run out of the pocket so much. And that's why you kind of got a lot of Payton Thorne getting a lot of rushing yards last year, was because not a lot of them were design quarterback runs. It was more of, hey, my left tackle just kind of missed an assignment. I have to run out of the pocket now, and my receivers aren't good enough to get open. So there I go, running up down the sideline. So really, it's just finding that. And I think this unit, again, this is one of the most talented Auburn teams. I don't think is gonna win the championship or win 10 plus games, because I just think the offensive line made so many improvements in the right direction. I don't want to sound like I'm booging or being too biased here, because of course I'm wearing Auburn on my shirt right now. It's an Auburn football show, Auburn show just in general. But the offensive line looks really good, and I'm very excited if the offensive line improves. Now, number 2, I have Payton Thorne has to become more consistent. Now, this kind of goes into the whole thing. It has split the fan base in two sides. There are the people who are ready to get Payton Thorne out on the field and watch how he's improved, prove that he can be a top quarterback in the SEC, prove that he can be what he was at Michigan State in 2021. That's what people are ready to see. That's what people are expecting to see. And then you have the other side of the fan base who just absolutely hates Payton Thorne, wants to start Hank Brown, start Holden Gardner, throw Walker White into the flames. But you got to understand, this is Payton Thorne's team until proven otherwise. Wishing for anything else, wishing for another quarterback go in, is wishing for Payton Thorne's failure, which I think is completely messed up as a fan of a team. Payton Thorne showed a lot of improvement at the end of the season last year. Whenever he finally got shown confidence from the coaching staff in throwing the ball, getting the plays correctly called to him, he showed a lot of improvement. He played outstanding in the Iron Bowl, I think. And then the bowl game happened. And then everyone just split off into those groups of, I hate Payton Thorne or you love Payton Thorne. It's like one of the two things. And of course, you're listening to the guy who was the Robbie Ashford fan all of last season. I still have his jersey hung up on my wall. And of course, I still get a lot of hate for that, just having Robbie Ashford on my wall. But you got to see that I have also came out and said that Payton Thorne is the quarterback for 2024. He is the guy who I want running the ship. Of course, you're Holden Gardner. I don't know what exactly he can or can't do. We haven't seen a lot of Holden Gardner. Saw a little bit of Hank Brown, and of course, you've seen nothing of Walker White yet in an Auburn football uniform outside of, I'm not going to count A-Day because I don't think A-Day is really a real experience for quarterbacks because you don't really have to worry about the pressure. Payton Thorne is the starting quarterback for the Auburn Tigers. He is going to be the starting quarterback until unlucky circumstances happen and a couple plays in a row don't go his way or injury happens. It is going to be Payton Thorne. It is time to come to terms with that. College football is in only 67 days from right now. Auburn football, at least. I keep getting those mixed up. 60 days till college football happens. It's time to come to terms with the fact that Payton Thorne is your quarterback. And for Auburn to have a breakout season, it comes down to Payton Thorne's arm. So very excited to see how the season goes for Payton Thorne, and hopefully the fan base will get behind him sooner rather than later. And my number one spot, unity amongst the coaching staff must be noticeable. Now, last year, this was a complete wishy-washy coaching staff in the first year of Hugh Freeze. It was a Tower of Babel level confusion in the offensive play calling room between Hugh Freeze and the hate that the name is escaping me off the top of my head. Oh no, that's bothering me so much. So that's gonna have me ramble on for a little bit until I figure it out. I cannot believe that I completely forgot his name, and I'm just gonna keep rambling on. Oh Lord, that's so bad of me. Forgot. Almost said Philip, but I just know it's not. Philip Montgomery. There it is. I'm stupid. Y'all just heard 30 seconds of me rambling about trying to find out Philip Montgomery's name, which Auburn fired him in the offseason, so I could have said previous offensive coordinator, but that's funny. Hired Derek Nix to be probably mostly a recruiter, work with the running backs as well. You're gonna get mostly Hugh Freeze play calls in this season. I don't think Derek Nix was brought on to be a play caller. I'm sure he'll have his voice heard in the running back, like running plays, but most is going to be Hugh Freeze. And last year you didn't get that. You got two guys with two different languages calling plays, and it just a whole lot of mix up going on, and just a lot of nothing went on. Auburn's offense was abysmal last year. Outside of running the ball, could not pass the ball. One of the worst in the country in terms of passing the ball, and just yards, touchdowns, ratings, all of it was terrible. This year, it comes down to really getting that coaching staff molded together into a complete unit. No team has ever won a championship with a terrible coaching staff. And of course, there's like bad coaches who've won championships before. Ed Orgeron, Gene Chizik come to mind right away. But you got to have a complete and just all the working parts of the coaching staff working as one. You can't have what you had last year. That was terrible. And it's a whole new look coaching staff. You got a new running back coach. You have a new offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. You have only one guy working on the secondary now. A new quarterback coach. You got all new coaches, basically, outside of a couple of guys. But that's what Auburn really needs. You got to have unity in your coaching staff. Of course, you got to have it in your locker room as well, but it's going to shadow a jobbled up like coaching staff that can't work together is going to overshadow anything that goes on in the locker room. And of course, that's also going to cause a lot of issues in the locker room if your coaching staff isn't working together. So that's my list of what Auburn needs to do to break out in 2024. And we'll be right back after this little ad read. And we're going to do our way too early preseason previews with Auburn's first SEC game of the season against the Arkansas Razorbacks. So we'll be right back.
Are you tired of having to rummage through just clothes after clothes after clothes looking for something to wear? Are you tired of your friends making fun of you for your terrible fashion sense? Well, do we have the shirt for you? Go to thewarreport.com, get your laptop out and do it right now. Go to the shop and get your very own Feelin' Loopy t-shirt as well as your college loop hat, and you can get both of them for only $25 each. Plus shipping and handling, of course. But with that, now back to your regular scheduled program.
Yeah, and of course, those shirts, warreport.com. First page on the shop is going to be the hat, which I'm wearing right now. And of course, on the second page is going to be the shirt, which is very comfortable, most comfortable shirt you're ever going to wear in your entire life. Completely worth the cost, $25, very reasonable price. They're so comfortable. And of course, that's the second best way to support the show. The first best way is, of course, liking, subscribing, and ringing the bell, I guess, as well, just to get the latest from us right here, the College Loop Podcast. And of course, y'all have been doing a great job of subscribing. We've had 2 videos in the past week get 1,000 views. Let's go. Let's make it 3. Let's have every single video from now on get 1,000 views. It's just so cool. Seeing it go from 900 to 1K. It's so awesome. Someone who sits there and is a numbers nerd and just loves watching analytics. But Going on to the last segment of today's show before we get out of here. Auburn takes on Arkansas in week 4 of the college football season, their first SEC game of the regular season. Of course, right now, as they stand, Auburn is 3-0 in our preseason, way too early season previews. So Arkansas last year went an abysmal 4-8, 1-7 in the SEC. Last time they met Auburn was, of course, last year in Fayetteville, where Auburn won 41-10, which brings Auburn's win total to 20 against Arkansas, which is a record of 20, 12, and 1. Arkansas, not the best team this year. Of course, they made a lot of strides in the right direction. I think they picked up a lot of decent guys going into the season. I still have them going for. I have them going 4-8 again, 1-7 in the SEC. I don't think that they're going to beat anybody outside of Mississippi State. I was watching a bunch of guys trying to get ready for this episode, and some guys were saying Arkansas was going to beat like Texas, which I thought was crazy. This team isn't going to be good enough to keep Sam Pittman around for another year. I think this is definitely the last year of the Sam Pittman era. And of course, which opens up many questions about who the next coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks is going to be, especially now that they've hired offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino, who many people are well aware of who Bobby Petrino is and what happened in his last stop at Arkansas, which came to a glorious crash and burn of motorcycle proportions. I will not go into details about that, but that is just something that I think is hilarious that they hired Bobby Petrino. It'll never not be funny to me. But so Arkansas, back to that. Arkansas finished this past season's high school recruiting rankings at 28th, which is 14th in the SEC, which now isn't last place. It's now 2 spots away from it. 14th out of 16th, and of course, going to the transfer portal, finishing 26th in the portal, finishing 11th in the SEC. These are per 24/7. Returning 9 starters, 4 on the offense, 5 on the defense, and of course, one of their biggest pickups from the transfer portal was, of course, Talon Green, who is going to go into the season as the starting quarterback for the Arkansas Razorbacks, coming out of Boise State. The dual threat quarterback, who is 6'6", 220 pounds. He threw for 1,700 yards last year, 11 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, while rushing for 436 yards and 9 touchdowns. Now, Bobby Petrino actually picked up Talon Green, like, personally. He wanted Talon Green out of the portal. And I think it kind of works for the sense of you lose KJ Jefferson, he goes down to UCF. You're looking for another big-bodied dual threat quarterback like you had with KJ Jefferson. You find Talon Green, of course, not the best production last year. There are a lot of interceptions because only having 2 more touchdown interceptions is not very good. So you're going to kind of see a new look Arkansas from last year. Last year, their offense was abysmally bad. It was terrible. Nothing went right. Injuries galore were going on. But this year, I think you're going to see a little bit more improvement out of Arkansas's offense. I don't think you're going to see loads enough for them to win or go to a bowl game. I still think that Arkansas is going to be a bad team, and Sam Pittman is not going to be Arkansas Razorbacks coach going to 2025. But Talon Green is a very interesting pickup. I think the talent that he possesses as a specimen is really interesting. I think that with the guys that they have already, their tight end Haas could be one of the top tight ends of the SEC. If he hadn't gotten hurt last year, we probably would have been talking about him like as we talk about Valdo as well. But I don't see a world where their offense is again that much better than last year to where they are winning 5, 6, 7 games. I think their win total right now is 5.5, which I think I would probably put the under on. I think the only game that I have them winning or have them losing they could potentially win was Oklahoma State. But I'm going to go Oklahoma State in that game just because of Ollie Gordon III is just an absolute beast. But defensively, this team is not bad. This team can finish in the middle of the pack in the SEC in the defensive rankings because they brought back, again, 5 of their starters, Landon Jackson being the big name on the defense, a defensive end who is athletic. He is a freak of nature on the defensive line. He is very, very good. He's a guy who, surprisingly enough, I think if Arkansas produces a top-round NFL talent in the next coming years, it'll be Landon Jackson. Especially the defense was very good, especially under former Auburn player Travis Williams, Coach T. Will himself. really turned Arkansas to a very solid defense last year. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think they picked up a lot of great guys from the portal who work well on the defense side of the ball. And the shortcomings of this game are going to come down to Auburn against this Arkansas defense. I don't think Auburn's defense is going to have enough problems with Arkansas's offense to really give up a lot of points. It'll come down to, can Auburn shut down the pass rush and the interior defense of Arkansas? And I think that's very feasible. I think it's too feasible to really talk about, because I'm not too high on Arkansas. I think you could see a game probably close to how last year's went, or you could probably see a closer game. I think if I had to give a prediction right now, I think it works out very well in Auburn's favor. Auburn's probably going to pass the ball a little bit more in this game than they have the past three, which works out very well. Arkansas lost a lot of players in the secondary to the portal. I think Auburn wins this game. I'm going to go 38-17. That's kind of where I'm sitting on that. I think it's a fair prediction, but Arkansas fans probably won't agree. They are very loud when it comes to saying their teams are going to lose. Arkansas basketball will be probably more interesting to watch than Arkansas football this year. But that does it for my prediction series. Of course, leave your predictions for how you think Auburn is going to play against Arkansas in week 4. And what's your current standings as we get through the remainder of the schedule? Next week is, of course, the most interesting game up to this point, Oklahoma Sooners, which I think is going to be a very fun game. It's going to be a game that I'm hopefully going to try to get tickets to, because I'm just so excited to watch Oklahoma in the SEC, especially walking into Jordan-Hare Stadium. And what should have been a night game, I'm still not forgiving anyone for not making that a night game. But be interested to see how that goes on. Thursday, we're going to be starting a new series for the Thursday show. We're going to be doing position breakdown, starting off, of course, with the quarterback position. So, that being said, thanks for tuning in to this installment of the College Loop Podcast. I'm Dylan Larck, at your boy the Tank on Twitter, just right there, at your boy the Tank, at YABOY the Tank. Also on Instagram as well, at Dylan Larck, at DYLENLERCK. And of course, you can catch it right here in the College Loop Podcast. If you like, comment, subscribe. Again, y'all been doing such a great job subscribing. 802 subscribers and counting. So happy to see all of these new faces coming down to come watch the College Loop. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the work, all is at the College Loop, especially to get how many more days until college football? Again, today is 67. Today's post was Jacob Quattlebaum, a long snapper favorite. Tomorrow, I will not give that away who it is, but you'll have to follow to find out. And of course, if you're tired of seeing my face on YouTube, you can go listen to my voice on Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts, of course, Amazon Music, all those at the College Loop as well. And of course, all that being said, thanks for tuning in. War Eagle, and this has been the College Loop Podcast.